You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 3rd of June 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. Coming up on today's programme.
Ik heb de minister-president net ook laten weten dat ik de PVV-bewindslieden uit het kabinet zal terugtrekken.
Geert Wilders says he's informed the Prime Minister that his party is leaving the government of the Netherlands. Iran appears on the brink of rejecting a nuclear proposal from the US. We'll get the latest from Washington. We'll cross to Brussels to examine the accelerated deadline for tariff deals with the Trump administration. And we'll hear all about a new airport project in Cambodia. Plus,
we're always trying to find new ways of bringing in new audiences, of bringing film to audiences and audiences to films.
Mubi, the streaming platform, production company and film distributor, has launched a publishing arm focusing on books about cinema and the visual arts. We'll catch up with Daniel Kassman, the man behind the project. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Georgina Godwin. The Dutch coalition government has collapsed after the far-right leader Geert Wilders pulled his PVV Party for Freedom out, citing differences with his partners over immigration policy. Shene Bostas is a Netherlands-based journalist and she joins us on the line now from Amsterdam. Many thanks for coming on the programme. After Wilders' election win back in November 2023, he and his three coalition partners agreed to implement what he called the strictest ever immigration policy. What did that entail?
The two main things that they wanted to do was to create two new laws to have a double status system for asylum seekers, so that people who were fleeing what were considered temporary measures like war would have a lower status and lower set of rights than people who were, say, political refugees. And they also wanted to limit family reunification rights. And these two bills are still going through the normal political process.
So why has this all fallen apart now?
Well, it's a little bit bemusing for many people in the Netherlands, probably for political reasons, because the three other coalition parties point out that there is no difference between them and the PVV on issues like asylum. They all support limiting refugees into the Netherlands. Actually, the largest group of refugees are labour migrants, not asylum seekers anyway. So different laws could look at what kind of sectors you might want to have, like low-value farming, for instance, or distribution centres that depend on low-paid migrant labour where there's no housing for people. But Wilders has decided to make a big row about asylum. He had a press conference last week and said that if the other parties didn't break open the coalition agreement and adopt 10 new measures that he proposed on asylum, that he would walk out. And that's what he's done.
And has he just blown this crisis up then in order to bring down the government? What's his aim here?
Well, he's a party that traditionally does very well on asylum, and he had plummeted in the polls recently because other things are top of the mind for voters, like the Dutch housing crisis, which has reached proportions such that children are sometimes sleeping in garages if their parents' relationships break down. And healthcare is another big issue. So when asylum isn't number one, his party doesn't do so well in the polls, and other parties are taking over from him in the polls. But the question is what he really has to gain by breaking up this government, because on the basis of the rows and the disruption and the constant crisis in this government, I don't know that any other party would want to form a coalition with him again in the future. So perhaps his aim is to be back in opposition.
How have his coalition partners reacted to this most recent turn of events?
I mean, it's quite funny. They've been talking about him like you'd talk about an irascible toddler. This morning they were talking about whether he would maybe have had a good sleep and how the meeting would go. And afterwards they openly called him childish and said it was totally irresponsible. The Netherlands got things that it needs to get on with solving for the voters of the Netherlands. And their line is that it's irresponsible to create a political crisis. And they were also talking about whether they could continue as a minority government, which is something that will be discussed in a meeting in about half an hour.
So, I mean, in your view, what does this mean for the Netherlands?
I think it means more chaos and more waiting for problems to be solved. The Netherlands has got huge problems around housing, building houses for a start, but long ongoing problems like what you do about pollution, nitrogen pollution, the levels of farming in the country. All this means is more delay in getting laws through. This is a coalition country. In order to get laws through, you have to work with people in the lower house, you have to build coalition in the upper house. It's not a country that's run by Twitter or X or social media. It's run by quiet coffee drinking, making coalitions and building good laws.
So this crisis comes just weeks before the Netherlands is due to host world leaders for a NATO summit. Is that going to have an impact?
It's quite embarrassing, isn't it? I mean, the Dutch were traditionally the voice of sobriety within Europe and within the world. They were sensible. They are one of the countries that's most exposed to the world in terms of trading. They were traditionally open about things like immigration because they knew that they could benefit from having the best brains in the world coming to their country. I think it's deeply embarrassing for Mark Rutte, who ran 4 governments and is now bringing NATO, the world, to The Hague later this month.
And the people of the Netherlands, how are they feeling about this?
I think it's not a big surprise. I mean, even some PVV voters you saw interviewed this morning were saying, well, it's good they were getting nothing done. There's just been constant rows. One of the government ministers a few weeks ago said in a TV programme that the cabinet had decided to limit it to 1 political crisis a week. I mean, if this is your biggest aim, things are not good.
Shanae Bostas, thank you very much indeed. That's Shanae, who was a journalist in the Netherlands, talking to us from Amsterdam. Now, here's Hassan Anderson with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Georgina. The UK has unveiled a major defence overhaul programme to meet new threats posed by Russia, nuclear risks and cyber attacks, responding to US President Donald Trump's remarks that Europe should take more responsibility of its own security. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has pledged the largest sustained increase in British defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Millions of South Koreans have been voting in a snap presidential election today, triggered by the martial law crisis prompted by former leader Yoon Suk-yeol late last year. The opposition's Lee Jae-myung is the front-runner, with the ruling party's Kim Moon-so trailing him. The new president will face the challenge of bringing together a polarised country and economic pressures due to US tariffs. And France's Senate has debated a bill to curb the rise of fast fashion. The move aims to tackle the influx of environmentally unfriendly, low-quality clothes coming into the country, mainly from countries like China. According to France's Environment Agency, ADEME, an average of 35 garments are discarded every second. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Georgina.
Thank you, Hassan. Iran is reportedly on the brink of rejecting a nuclear deal proposal from the United States. The US is trying to renegotiate a new deal after pulling out of the previous agreement between Iran and 6 major powers in 2018. Holly Dagres is a senior fellow with the Washington Institute and author of the Iranist weekly newsletter. She joins us now from the US Capitol. Holly, thanks for coming on the show. There have been 5 rounds of indirect talks since negotiations began, but this US proposal was the first to be written down. What does it say?
Hi, Georgina. Thanks for having me on the program. It's a bit confusing, frankly. Just based off the reports, it sounds like the United States is allowing Iran to enrich uranium, but it's going to be in a regional consortium. Basically, it would entail Saudi Arabia, other Arab states, Iran, and the United States. But this is what the reports are saying. But it also contradicts what the U.S. president tweeted last night, or posted on Truth Social, which is that Iran would not be allowed to enrich uranium. So I think it just based off those two, it seems like they're almost the opposites. And it's not surprising that one Iranian official has called this latest proposal incoherent and disjointed.
And has there been an official reaction from Iran? I mean, we're hearing that they're poised to pull out. Have they actually done so?
Not so far, but a lot of the anonymous sources that are being quoted are suggesting that they're not happy with this proposal at all. And that does suggest that there might be a risk for collapse if they're not able to actually agree to this proposal. And I think it's noteworthy that just last week, the U.S. president had said he might have good news on Iran in the coming days. So whatever he has sent to the Iranians, I think he assumed they were going to take it. So what does that mean next? It sounds like not good if people that believe in diplomacy want to see a positive outcome with these talks.
So what would be the consequences of a complete breakdown in talks?
Well, it would mean, for starters, that maximum pressure, the President Trump's strategy towards Iran would continue, which would consist of pushing for more sanctions on the country. But I think more importantly, it would mean that there would be room for Israel to attack the country's nuclear facilities, because according to reports in recent weeks, this is something that Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, and Trump have been bumping heads over, that Israel was actually ready to go. And it's something they've been pushing given the post-October 7th dynamics, and given that there's concern that Iran might go all the way with its nuclear program.
Although we've been on the brink in the last few months, we've been at this point before, and always it seems that Iran has been keen to avoid escalating conflict.
Well, it's not just Iran, actually. The United States as well, under President Donald Trump. He's concerned about getting the United States being stuck in another quote unquote forever war. And so there's a real push from the administration and from Iran to actually sit down with these talks. And I think it really is noteworthy that this is a very different approach to the first Trump administration, when the Iranians were not really willing to sit down, at least directly, with the United States, especially given that under the first administration, Quds first commander Qasem Soleimani was assassinated. So the fact that these two countries were sitting down so quickly under this deadline that was sent initially through a letter that the president had said that there would be a 2-month deadline for talks, really means that they were really serious and genuine. But the real concern was always like, what would happen when the technical aspect of the deal or talks or negotiations would continue? And that's where we're at right now, which is the complexities and the details about if Iran would be allowed to enrich uranium or not, which the Iranians have always said would be their red line.
And I mean, as you say, there's a whole kind of regional aspect to this. Can you tell us more about that, and how, I wonder how much trust exists then, because with countries like Saudi Arabia, who Iran would really have to work closely with?
Well, as I noted earlier, this is a very different approach between the U.S. and Iran. In the first Trump administration, Gulf states in the Persian Gulf like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates were very much for maximum pressure. And as you can see, there's now a complete 180, because now they're being considered to be part of this regional consortium. And it's because they felt left out of the original deal because of Iran's backing of regional proxies. And so now, given the dynamics in the region, there's been better relations between Iran and its neighbors, and they want to be part of something in this regional consortium, if we're to believe that the reports are true, would be actually considered a confidence-building measure that brings trust between Iran and its neighbors, to suggest that it would not be trying to develop a nuclear weapon.
Holly, thank you very much indeed. That's Holly Douglas of the Washington Institute. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You're back with The Briefing on Monocle Radio. On April the 9th, Donald Trump paused his Liberation Day tariffs for 90 days. That means July the 8th. But Reuters is reporting that the administration has given another deadline, tomorrow, by which time some countries must provide their best offer on trade negotiations. Well, Rebecca Christie is a senior fellow at the Brussels-based think tank Bruegel and host of the Sound of Economics podcast. She joins me on the line now. Rebecca, what do we know about this leaked draft document?
I only know what I read in the Reuters article, which does seem very well reported, and says it's not clear which countries have received this letter. The European Union negotiates trade deals as a bloc. It did not cave when Trump recently said that he might start imposing high tariffs on June the 2nd, today. So it's unclear to me whether this is a serious negotiating tactic, whether there are talks that could lead to some sort of offer, or if this is another example of the Trump administration sort of turning tables over and seeing if anyone is intimidated enough to cave in and offer something they wouldn't otherwise.
I mean, the July the 8th deadline is 5 weeks away. Do we have any idea why there's this sudden urgency?
In the same way that Trump's threat to impose high tariffs within a week because he was frustrated by the lack of progress. I mean, we don't know why then, where that came from. It didn't appear that the Trump cabinet had been briefed on it. Now, I don't know why today is more urgent than next week or the other day when they made the other threat. It is the case that these escalations and retreats seem to be a deliberate part of the strategy to scare people, to make them uncomfortable, to add a sense of urgency at all times to the debate in hopes of closing a deal that, in the Trump administration's hope, would give them the upper hand.
What's been the reaction in Brussels?
In Brussels, people are much more measured. For one thing, even without the uncertainties of the current administration, the way that the U.S. and the EU negotiate is inherently different. The EU approach is to have a bunch of summits, agree together on an outcome, and then do the technical work required to get there and sign the technical work sometime after the political agreement is reached. In general, the U.S. likes to do the technical work first, see how far they get, and then do a political agreement that shows where the technical work stopped. In this case, you've sort of got the worst of both systems because you have the EU trying to figure out what to base their technical work off of, and the U.S. really unwilling to negotiate contours without seeing concessions right away. And how do you concede from something that hasn't been done yet?
And how do you agree something that may not be legal? Do we know what the current legal position of the tariffs are?
We do not. We do know that the Trump administration is very committed to them. We also know that this Congress is very receptive to what the Trump administration wants. Right now, all attention is focused on the big, beautiful bill. Given how long that may take to get through, it's possible that the House could act faster to impose some sort of new tariff regime or at least legitimize what is currently going on. The Trump administration has said they're not going to back down. It does seem to be a big political talking point for them. So something is probably in the area, but we don't know exactly what.
Because, I mean, it seems in that report that it's saying if the court ruling against the tariffs is upheld, they're just going to go ahead anyway.
That would match what they've been doing on immigration and other things. The accountability mechanisms in this administration really are not functioning as I would say they are supposed to. So, yeah, we'll see. They're going to keep throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that goes for implementing things as well as trying to negotiate them.
And Rebecca, what effect is this likely to have on the markets?
The one to watch will be the U.S. Treasury bond market. Treasury is going to sell 30-year bonds soon, and the interest rate that the U.S. gets, if it's extremely high or if it's something more in line with where the rest of the market is trading, that'll give you a sense of if people are really starting to lose confidence in the U.S. The fact that the U.S. Treasury Secretary is out there saying, we're not going to default. No one is talking about default. The fact that one even has to engage with that as an idea, even just to knock it down, is inherently worrying. The stock markets are more a sense of confidence. Are consumers feeling good or not? So it's a sign that people still have some electoral support for Trump, that the stock market is not crashing all the time, but the bond market is going to tell you if things have really developed into a serious problem.
Rebecca, thank you very much indeed. That's Rebecca Christie with Bruegel in Brussels. And this is The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Cambodia is planning to open its $1.5 billion Techno International Airport this September. It's the country's largest infrastructure project ever, and it will be one of Southeast Asia's biggest airports. But recently, it's been caught in a geopolitical web on the question of financing. China's development bank withdrew from an initial $1.1 billion loan agreement in 2019. Cambodia then self-financed through domestic bonds, and now, unexpectedly, the US Development Finance Corporation, backed by the Trump administration, is considering support. Well, I'm joined now by Matt Driscoll, who's editor of Asian Aviation. Matt, welcome to the show. I wonder if you could briefly explain this airport development project. What drove Cambodia's decision to build this massive new airport?
Well, like a lot of developing countries, and not just developing countries, but other countries as well, these are considered sort of showcases or showpieces of we have arrived on the international scene, and look at this modern airport. And there was also a certain need for it. The current airport, which I find very easy to fly through, and always, I'd never have a problem going through it. It is sort of maxing out on capacity. It is located pretty much not in the center of Phnom Penh, but very close to it. And so there was no space to expand the airport to handle future expansion of tourism, which is Cambodia's sort of main money maker. So that was the reason. It was there was no room for expansion at the old airport, and so it was time to build a new one. Unfortunately, like with a lot of airports that are being built in Asia and elsewhere in the world these days, it's located a bit further away. So it's, instead of taking 45 minutes, even with traffic, to get to the airport, it's probably going to take me an hour, hour and a half to get there now.
The US Development Finance Corporation's now considering supporting at a very late stage. I mean, is that significant? What does it mean for the US to get involved at this point in the project?
Well, if anyone thinks that the U.S. is going to, under the current administration, is actually going to invest in the airport at this stage of the game, I've got some swampland in Florida I'd like to sell you, or a tin mine in where are the big tin mines in England? In
somewhere
Cornwall.
Up north.
yeah, or I thought they were in Cornwall. But I think that is. I would be extremely surprised if the current administration decided to do that. I think any money that the U.S., if they really want to make a difference in winning the hearts and minds of Cambodia, they should restore the funding from USAID, which a lot of which went to actual people on the ground and not to the big companies that are financing the project. USAID was involved in demining. There's a lot of unexploded ordnance from the Vietnam War and the bombing of Cambodia during that period. And the pullout of the USAID people and the funding, that money would be a lot better spent than coming in at this late stage and trying to make some statement by investing in the airport.
Yeah. And Matt, finally, I wonder how this airport will change Cambodia's position in Southeast Asian aviation. Can it compete with hubs like Singapore or Bangkok? And does the $1.5 billion investment compare to other major airport development projects in the region?
Very quick answer. Singapore, no. Changi Airport, my absolute favorite airport in the entire world. It wins, hands down, the #1 spot. Bangkok is okay. Probably not my favorite airport to fly through. It's looking a little bit rough around the edges, but Bangkok or Thailand is looking to spend some money on that. But how will it change? Cambodia has ambitions to compete with Singapore and Bangkok in certain areas, and they will to a certain extent. Singapore, actually, there's very few, unless you like orchids and shopping. I lived in Singapore for 11 years, and not a lot to do unless you want to go to the botanical gardens or gamble at the casinos there. But Cambodia's got Angkor Wat, it's got the temples, which actually they just built a new airport in Siem Reap. But there's lots of other projects going on in Southeast Asia. I took a quick look at a list I found. Vietnam is spending billions of dollars on Long Tan, which is going to be in Ho Chi Minh. The Philippines is expanding and adding some new airports. As I said, Thailand is also spending, it looks like, about $7 billion on their main airport expansion. And don't forget, Singapore itself, my favorite, is building terminal number 5. I think it opens in probably another 3 or 4 years. But Singapore is going to maintain its top position for a long time. Cambodia wants to compete, but it's got a long way to go before it'll reach Singapore.
Matt, just a very quick question before you go. Like you, I love Changi Airport. I've been through it, I think, 4 times in the last couple of months. What makes it so right? What does Singapore really grasp that other places are not getting?
It's not just the hardware. Anybody can build an airport. Anybody, if you have enough money, if you've got a spare $2 billion laying around, you can hire the architects, you can hire the construction companies, and you can build the airport. What Singapore does right is they get the software right. They get the services right. I know it's a terrible habit, but everybody complains about, people are the Karens at the airport that go on these rages. If you probably put more smoking lounges in American airports or European airports have some. You let people have a cigarette before they get on the plane, there'll be a lot less. Singapore's got that. They've got gardens. They've got all the software that you need. Restaurants, the cleanest restrooms in the entire airport world I've ever been in. They're absolutely wonderful. Service is wonderful. The technology that they've installed, my wife would disagree because I've got about 10 computers in my office. But the technology that Singapore is implementing works very well. The last time I flew through there, I had the automated immigration lane. Just put my passport in, took my picture, took my fingerprints. Took 5 minutes to get through immigration, and it was wonderful. The only complaint I have about Singapore and automation is whenever I try to do my own bag check, it never works for me. So I have I've decided I skip the bag check and I go straight to the helpline where I deal with a human being. For some reason, I never can check my own bag using the technology there. But the other technology that Singapore has used is working, I won't say perfectly, but probably in the 95% plus category. They get the hardware right and they get the software right.
Absolutely. And then you can go for a fag in the rooftop cactus garden. Matt, thank you very much indeed. That's Matt Driscoll, editor of Asian Aviation, talking to us from Phnom Penh. This is The Briefing. And finally, on today's show, London-based streaming platform, production company and film distributor Mubi has launched a new venture, a publishing arm focusing on books about cinema and the visual arts. Monocle Radio's Fernando Augusto Pacheco caught up with Daniel Kassman, Mubi's vice president of editorial content, to talk about their first release, Read, Frame, Type, Film.
One of the most exciting things about Mubi in general, and being at Mubi as long as I have, is that we're always expanding the radius of cinephilia. We're always trying to find new ways of bringing in new audiences, of bringing film to audiences and audiences to films. And so whether that means producing films or distributing films, putting films in theaters and online, we're always looking for new mediums, new methods of reaching audiences, and publishing is no different. In 2007, we started our online journal, Notebook, in order to create a digital publication that could reach a global audience, to advocate for cinema, to talk to filmmakers we love, to report from film festivals. And now with books, we're able to expand this circle even further and create physical objects that really embody our love of cinema, the artistry of cinema, embody them in a physical form that has a lasting value.
And I think this would sit so well to people that like the brand already, because I think there's a value to kind of the printed product in a way, right?
Absolutely. I mean, in a funny way, Mubi has gone backwards in order to go forwards. We started in a digital sphere. We started streaming movies. We started an online journal. Then eventually we put physical movies into physical theaters. We started creating a physical magazine, physical books. So, the trajectory of most film companies is you start in the physical world and you move to the virtual. We started virtual and moved to the physical. And I think our history really speaks to looking for ways of engaging people. And so if we first found an audience globally in the clouds, let's say, in a digital environment, now we have the ability to meet people where they are in bookshops, at movie theaters, at film festivals. I think engaging people outside the digital sphere as well as on the digital sphere is really the key to growing and maintaining an audience.
Before we talk about your first release, I believe there will be kind of different strands of the books you will publish. I wonder if you can tell us a bit more about what are those strands?
Yes, absolutely. So the way we're thinking about our publishing house is having several different series that you can pick up and put down year on year. And inside those series, we can do new and playful things. I mean, for one, I think it should be said that we're cognizant that there's many beautiful film publishers out there, book publishers that publish on films, art publishers that publish on films. And so we don't take starting a new publishing imprint lightly. We want to do something new and different and not just the same old thing. So with these 4 strands, we're hoping to create themes in which we can be playful, engage the subject, engage the audience, engage the format of the printed media in new ways. One strand is called Auteurs. It's devoted to artist books. That's the aim to collaborate with films and filmmakers for them to create books with us. Rather than us do a monograph about a filmmaker, we would come to a filmmaker and make a book with them. So many great filmmakers have other artistic practices that are with or adjacent to their work in film. And we would like to give them the opportunity to work in the printed medium in the way that they have the opportunity to work in film itself. We're also looking at the past and in other languages as well. We have a series called Internegatives. And the aim of that series is to do new translations into English, as well as republish untranslated works. I think this really aligns with what Mubi's curatorial values as a streaming platform has been for so long, which is that cinema is from all over the world, and it's also from many different eras. Cinema is an art that's now 135 years old, and there's cinema that's that old, but still fresh and deserves to be revived and introduced to new audiences. And I think we can do this in the printed format as well. So many good books have either been made in languages that are not accessible to English language readers, or have been made but have fallen out of print or lost or forgotten to time. And we can use our intervention to bring this to new audiences. And then we're looking at books that we will devote to Mubi productions or releases. We're calling this series Lights. And what we're hoping to do here is not the same old thing of a nice screenplay with some nice behind the scenes photography, but really having the book embrace what these films are, embody the values and the artistry of the film subject, and transform that into a book. It's not just a book about a movie, it somehow embodies and carries on the artistry of that film in the printed medium. And then finally, the main series, and the series that our first book is devoted to, we're calling Projections. And that's devoted to film culture and film history at large, which will allow us to cover a whole range of diverse topics, in this case, artist films and typography.
And do you want to surprise people as well? Because it's so interesting, your first release, read frame type film, but it's not like the most obvious choice. Let's release and do something with the substance. But it's such an interesting topic that I haven't seen many books about it, which is kind of the relationship between film and typography. So tell us a bit more why you've decided this one as your kind of first book as well. And do you agree with me? It's a very interesting topic.
Well, thank you so much for pointing that out. I do agree with you. I think it's a little bit unusual and unexpected, and in a way that is also something we really value at Mubi as a curatorial entity, which is that we want to surprise and delight our audiences, in this case readers, but from our curation standpoint, our viewers. So much of cinema can stall and get boring when it's the same old thing, when you know what to expect, when you boot up your streaming app and everything looks the same. We're trying to invigorate and differentiate what we do in order to underline and embrace the magic and the surprise of the art. And so, yes, you're right. We could have chosen a very, let's say, straightforward topic for our first book, or maybe something about a Mubi release itself. But instead, we asked ourselves, what are our values as a company and as a publisher? Certainly, we value film history. Certainly, we value celluloid and the original film medium. Certainly, we value the intersection of film with other arts, in this case, typography and design.
That was Daniel Kussman, Mubi's Vice President of Editorial Content, and you can listen to the full interview on The Stack this week. And that's all for this edition of The Briefing, which was produced by Chris Chermak and Ryuma Takahashi. Our researcher was Francesca Gilks and our studio manager was Steph Chungu. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Georgina Godwin. Goodbye and thanks for listening.